Yo, 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 what up, guys? Happy Thursday. Happy Thanksgiving. I hope today everyone really just enjoys time with their family. And yeah, enjoy the break. For me, I have today and tomorrow off, so that's great. 4-day weekend, haven't had one in a while. But in honor of the holidays, in honor of family, today's topic, it's something really deep, something that truly affects every single person. Every single person. Unless they were raised in a perfect household, which would basically be impossible. But yeah, we're going to be talking about generational trauma and how it's holding you back. This is a super deep topic for me, probably for a lot of people watching this. I might, I'm gonna dig deep into my personal stuff. So yeah, I might get a bit emotional, and I might get a bit emotional because so many people I know are affected by generational trauma. They're like my friends, other family members, and it hurts. It's sad to see. It's sad to see that the obvious things that my friends have gone through, my family. So yeah, I might get emotional. It's gonna get deep. But I think this is a good episode. I think every single person watching will truly be able to relate because everyone was raised from a baby. Everyone has gone through stuff. Maybe not from their, and yeah, say you were raised by your parents, but just whoever raised you, obviously. It's fairly common for generational trauma to be passed on. If not, you're one of the lucky, very, very, very lucky few. But yeah, let's as you can see, I'm in some festive clothing. I'm excited for the holidays. I'm excited for Christmas, Thanksgiving. I'm actually before I dig deep, let's talk about Thanksgiving. I like Thanksgiving because it's a day where you show a lot of gratitude, and I think showing gratitude is important to live a happy life. You want to be grateful, so I'm excited. I also love Thanksgiving food. Truthfully, like that might be lame. I think people will make fun of me, but I love turkey. I love mashed potatoes. I love gravy. I love it all. The only thing I don't like is stuffing. Stuffing is nasty. If you like stuffing, you need to get stuffed. You know what I mean? No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, let's dig into it. So let's start off by saying, what is generational trauma? And basically, it's just passed down. It's passed down from your parents or your grandparents, but it's basically just passed down pain, fears, survival strategies. And it's basically what happened. They passed down whatever happened to them. And it's obvious. Interesting thing about trauma is and that's why they call it trauma, is it forever, like it lingers for a long time. It lingers even when you think it's not there anymore. And that's why sometimes you react like, I feel like this happens all the time for me where I'll react to a situation and I normally would not act that way. And I'm like, why did I just act like that? Like, what caused that reaction? And a lot of the time it's trauma, generational trauma, the way you were raised when you were growing up. But yeah, and generational trauma, it stems from a lot of things. But like for example, like poverty, racism, addiction, especially like these next two things, especially like abuse and neglect. And for me personally, it comes from more like long term emotional stuff. So for example, never like having physical love, never getting hugged, or constant criticism would be another one that is common and that has affected me. And yeah, I would say the interesting thing is about trauma though is or generational trauma specifically. We're not talking about trauma. We're talking about generational trauma. Is it's normalized, so it doesn't really feel like trauma. And a lot of people just like are like, well, that's just how life is, or that's just how my family is, and it's just normalized. So it feels normal to you, but in reality, it's not. And the way general or generation sorry, generational trauma is passed down is through three main things. They pass it down. They pass it down in beliefs. So, for example, money's important, money's not important, or whatever. Behaviors. So, for example, a big behavior would be like you're bad at being vulnerable, and you've always been, even with just friends, right? And or it's passed down in making you feel like you had to take a role in life. For example, now you're the fixer, now you're the strong one, now you're the one who can handle the burden of all the pain in the family or whatever. So yeah, that's basically what generational trauma is. Everyone's dealt with it. For the lucky few that haven't, it's because they had parents that severely probably worked on it, but I would say that's very rare. And generational trauma is passed down for some a lot, for some not a lot. But I think it's more common than you think. There's probably most people most people I know, probably have a good amount of it. Obviously, some have it worse, but I think I guess I'll say the average level is probably a decent amount, if that makes sense. But yeah, so moving on though is, and this is the hard thing about generational trauma, we don't really know about it. Like, it's not obvious, if that makes sense. So, for example, you would say, oh, the way you act or the way you react to things, well, that's part of your personality, right? Or that's part of your identity. But in reality, it was taught to us. So, for example, these are pretty like, these probably will hit home for a lot of you. You say things like, I'm independent. I don't need anybody. I've never needed anybody. I'm good. I'm good alone. I'm independent. I've never needed anybody. I don't need anybody. Super common. Well, you might think, well, that's part of my personality. That's who I am. But in reality, that actually stems from never having anyone show up consistently in your life. So you just basically learned how to not need anybody. It was a survival instinct, a survival strategy. And so that's like one of the best examples. Another example would be, oh, I'm super driven. And yeah, you could be super driven, but a lot of people have trauma where productivity, so what they did, so when they were kids, like if they like got good grades or if they were a great athlete, that was the only way they ever got love or approval from their family. Other than that, if you got second place, if you got a B, zero approval. If you did great but you were not the best, zero approval. And it's common. That's another very common one that hits home for me a bit, which I'll get into, but later as we move on. But yeah, I would say, so instead of like something interesting, instead of it really being, oh, that's who you are, that's how I am, it's actually just what you were taught, and it was actually these things were how you survived and how you got through stuff. And yeah, that's trauma. So let's talk about how trauma affects people in their daily lives. And the main way, there's two main ways. There's okay, so there's three, but the one I see the most and the one I've dealt with when it's affected my relationships, a lot of the women I've dated, it's obvious it's affected them. But when it just comes to relationships, so examples of how it could affect your daily life is a lot of women I know are just men and women. I'm sorry, I don't mean to generalize women. Men and women, it's the same, even sides. For example, they love to choose emotionally unavailable people, and that's common, right? Another thing could be when someone has needs or wants, it feels like it's too much. It's another common one. Or something that I dealt with in my past situationship, unfortunately, was she loved to test me. So you like love to test people and just to see their reaction. And it's weird, but yeah, it's another common thing. Another very common way it affects your daily life is how you speak to yourself. And think about it, guys. We talk to ourselves 24/7. Our thoughts, whatever, we're always talking to ourselves in our mind. And our inner voice or inner critic is very much affected by generational trauma. So the way we self-talk, for example, some people have constant guilt. Like they're never good enough. They're guilty because they're not good enough. Some people, and this is very common, live in constant fear. Oh, I don't want to get my heart broken. I'm scared they're gonna leave, so they never commit in the first place. For me, and this hits really hard for me, and that's because I'm half Asian, so my mom is Asian, my dad is white, he's American. But something common in this Asian culture is are Asian parents, Asians are very hard, not very loving. They're just hard on their kids, and it's for sure generational trauma, and it's continued on. But I just felt like I was always pressured. I feel constant pressure. If I'm not perfect, I feel like I can't be loved. And yeah, it's always been that way. So I'm always trying to improve, probably doing too much. But yeah, I'm always trying to improve, always trying to be better, always just, yeah, because like I said, if I feel like if I'm not perfect or if I'm not the best, I'll never be loved. And it sucks. Now, the next way it obviously trauma affects you, and like another big way. So yeah, I guess all of these three are pretty even, I guess, and there's not one that's above the other, but behavior. So for example, you overwork, or you're overgiving, or you like to over explain. Those are very common. Or another great one is numbing. Like you love to numb the pain, so you know, you numb yourself through food, drugs, alcohol, and sex. All very common. Another very common behavior. And I think I was really like this for the longest time when I was younger. I've gotten better, but when I felt pain, when I felt upset, I would just isolate instead of like going to someone for help or talking about how I felt. And yeah, so that's how all these things can affect your daily life. And that's a lot, right? And like I could really, it would just take too long to really dig deep, but like we could talk about how the way you self talk to yourself affects so many different things in your life, or the way how your behaviors and how you react to things affect so many people and things in your life, or how your relationships are literally getting ruined because of this, that, and the third. But, we just keep it simple. Those are the ways that generational trauma can affect you in your daily life and is probably affecting you in your daily life. So, speaking of self talk and how you speak to yourself, let's dig a little bit deeper into how generational trauma really just shapes your inner voice, your inner critic. But the way people spoke to you or the way people treated you while you were growing up is honestly how you speak to yourself, right? And it's interesting because I think a lot of our inner critics sound like someone we knew or used to, or like we know or used to know. So it could be our parents, a teacher, a coach. And yeah, so it's very interesting because I try to think about where my inner critic comes from. And it comes from, I think, a lot. It's like 'cause my parents were hard on me, but then also my teachers were very hard on me to the point, basically like severe critics telling me I wasn't going to be anything, I wasn't going to make it, I wasn't going to graduate high school. Oh, this, that, and the third. I remember I had this basketball coach, a complete, just piece of shit. Was mean to everybody. Oh, I can't stand that dude. If I saw that dude today, I'd slap the teeth out of his mouth. Just an absolute. And like this was during middle school. Just a piece of work. And he was mean, angry, like severely angry, extremely verbally abusive to kids, right? So that was traumatizing. I mean, I have some friends that were on that team, and they were for sure traumatized. I'm traumatized from it. It made me feel like crap. I remember it was so bad that he actually, instead of like him pushing me, he pushed me so hard that and was so mean to me that when I was on the court, I was so nervous to mess up that I couldn't even perform. I was too busy worrying about messing up and not actually just living in the moment and playing the game of basketball. But yeah, that for sure. That dude's for sure. He's burning, if you know what I mean. He's when he's in that grave. I'm not gonna cap. That grave deserves to get pissed on. If I'm being real. But your inner voice, right, and going through generational trauma, it creates certain patterns based on what, like the way people spoke to you. And there's a few very common ways. One, if you grew up, so the way people spoke to you, if you grew up with criticism. So, for example, nothing was good enough. So, oh, sorry. If you grew up with criticism, it has led to this now where nothing's ever good enough. So you could be the best and it still wouldn't be good enough. You do this, that, and the third, and it's not enough. Or you sabotage or quit before you get rejected by like a person or whatever. So, for example, when you're dating somebody, you self sabotage it because you'd rather you mess it up and call it quits than get rejected. Very common. Another way, if you were if you were emotionally neglected as a child, this has now led to, and this is very common. This is also what I dealt. This is like probably one of the most common traits I've dealt with through my friends and exes and whatever. And my last girl, she was pretty. This was tough. I tried my best to like work her through it, but really, one, she would minimize her feelings. So instead of truly talking about how she felt, if she was hurt, if she was mad, if she was upset, if she was sad, she would always just hit me with like, "Oh, it's not that deep," or "It doesn't matter," or "I don't. It's all good. I don't care." Common stuff. You've probably heard it before. A lot of people. That's like one of the most common things. Another way that people act now because of emotional neglect as a child is they truly struggle to understand how they feel. And it's interesting. This is where I'll get deep, right? I feel like I had a bit of emotional neglect when I was growing up, or honestly, a lot, right? Like it's not a good example, but like an example of like how there was no emotions in my house is I didn't never heard music, never, ever heard music until I was in eighth grade, and I remember I heard Run DMX, and I was like, whoa, this a kid in my neighborhood showed me this, but anyways, I used to struggle to understand how I felt. I remember the first time. I remember when I felt mad or angry. I wouldn't really think about I would just react right to that feeling instead of and like do whatever, some kind of action. But I would never really try to understand why I was mad or if I was mad or if I was hurt and I that pain turned to anger. I would never really think about it, and I didn't really start thinking about that until after high school because, well, interestingly enough, and going through depression is really like when I started kind of self-reflecting and having a lot of self-awareness about my emotions. And there was two times, right, where, so for example, my first love ever in high school, she cheated on me. It broke my heart, right? I loved that, or I thought I did, right? And wow, man, I was hurt. I was depressed as hell. Like literally, I used to sit in my class, earbuds in, loud as fuck, can't hear shit. Everyone could hear my music, and I do that every single class. Did not care, not at all. And the interesting thing is, I never actually thought about how I was feeling during that time. I just reacted. And I went to another depressive, but I was depressed for sure. And I went to another depressive, and I was going through a lot at that time, not just with that, but with my family. But when I look back on that, I look back on, like, okay, so, sorry. I graduated. I felt lost again. I was depressed again. I started, like, realizing and being self aware of my feelings and kind of analyzing how I feel. And then I finally, so just when I was 16, 2 years later, I wasn't depressed anymore for 2 years. At 18, I'm starting to feel depressed again. I finally realized that at 16, I was depressed. And man, see, that's what I mean, and that came from having emotional neglect and really just struggling to understand how I feel, right? But anyways, next, a lot of people grew up in a chaotic household. The way people spoke to them was chaotic. Everything was chaotic. So now these people they equate peace with boredom, and this is very common. Healthy slash stable people in their life, they feel suspicious or they feel scary or they self sabotage because it's not normal to them and it's scary or suspicious. Very common. Next, there's a term called parentification. What is that? Well, that means that you had to be a parent to your parent. This is more rare, but it's still pretty common. And when people had to do that, now to this day, in the present, they feel responsible for anything and everything and everyone. They just feel responsible. And they have a hard time receiving any sort of care and they could only give it out. And that's very common. So those are the, common ways that are the common, I guess, patterns that most people have dealt with and that shape their inner voice and how basically created a lot of how they feel, how they talk to themselves at the present moment. Now, let's talk about how and why generational trauma holds us back. And I'm telling you right now, it holds us back more than we think. Like I said, a lot of people don't even realize that generational trauma what like affects them or because they think it's like, normalized, right? But it affects us, like I said, more than we think. If we really try to dig deep, you will realize that, right? But let's just talk about how it holds us back. Well, it holds us back in three areas, and I've touched on one already or two, but really it holds us back in relationships, career slash self growth, and how you see yourself, your self identity. First, relationships. How does it hold us back? Well, a lot of people can't be vulnerable or have a hard time being vulnerable because of it. They can't let anyone fully in, and they never have or can't let anyone fully in because they're scared to be heartbroken. They push people away when they get close. Super, super common. Push people away when they get close because they're scared. Another common interesting thing, this is more of like a toxic trait, like toxic stuff, but it's true. We confuse emotions. We can confuse emotions. For example, we think if we feel anxiety about someone that means we love them. Not true. Or another thing is we start to think that if there's drama in the relationship, that means we're passionate. That means we really care about them. That's why there's so much drama and toxicity. Eh, nope. You're just messed up in the head. Sorry. Well, it's true, but take that with a grain of salt. Another very common thing is people tolerate disrespect because they think it's better than being alone, which is not. It's not at all. So let's get that straight right now. There's how just how it truly holds us back. And I think after hearing those things, I bet you everyone that's listening right now can think of people that just popped up in their brain, their exes, their friends, whatever. Most of that stuff stems from generational trauma. So, and like, yeah, we're talking about generational trauma, right? Obviously, there's a lot of different kinds of trauma, but we're gonna stick to that, just generational. So, yeah, and I could think it's funny because that list that applies to 90% of the people I know, even counting me, right? Another thing, this is how it holds us back with career slash personal growth. We start to undersell ourselves because we think we're not good enough and we'll never be good enough. Another one that I see a lot of people do. I have one of my friends, shout out my boy, but he's a quiet guy. and he stays quiet. But sometimes I could tell he wants to speak. He's in rooms or in conversations where he wants to say something, but he doesn't. That stems from generational trauma. Another very common one: self sabotage and imposter syndrome. Those things stem from generational trauma. Now, the next thing, self identity. I mentioned this earlier, but we really we grow up in situations and then we start defining ourselves. For example, if your parents fought a lot, now you're the peacemaker. And so now, and since you grew up like that, that's a part of who you are now. You're always the peacemaker, or once again, like I mentioned, you're the strong one. You're the one who needs to have the burden of all the pain, everyone's pain, and you can take it, and your feelings don't matter because you could take it, and blah blah blah. But yeah, basically, you define yourself in these certain roles, and then without if these roles got stripped away from you, you have no clue who you actually are. Super common. Next, you feel guilty. So once again, we're still doing it. You feel guilty if you focus on yourself. Super common. Just I feel that way sometimes. Or if you like choose yourself over to others, you feel guilty. That's a self identity thing. But yeah, that's really those are like I just named it. So there's so many ways of how it holds us back. And if you think about it, like I said, all those things I just said, you so many examples of people just probably popped up in your brain. And there are a lot of examples of people popped up in my brain, and even me, I popped up in my own brain. So I'm guilty. But like I always say, it takes one to know one. So yeah, next. How can we or how do we break this? How do we break these patterns? Well, first, and this is kind of how once again, you got to give yourself grace. You got to accept things. So first off, you just have to realize it's not you, it's not your fault. It's not these pain and stuff and all this stuff, it's not yours. It was just passed down. And you have to accept that. And you're gonna have to accept. You have to be honest with yourself and just accept everything as it comes. No need to run away from it, push it away. Just accept it. I think next you need to start asking yourself questions, and a skill that I'll talk about in a different podcast, but that's very important. I think not a lot of people to have is self awareness, and I get why because self awareness, having true self awareness, basically means you're gonna suffer all the time. So, but you need to be a bit more self aware. And well, how do you do that? Well, you got to ask yourself questions. You got to ask yourself things like, oh, what did I, for example, you could really look in the past and break down stuff and talk to yourself like you were a child. Ask yourself, what did I go through? Write it down. Just write it down. What did I go through? What are common things I went through? Next question you ask yourself, what are common ways I act or and react to certain things? How do I act in relationships? And you could start asking yourself all the things I mentioned. Maybe you've never realized anything and you haven't even thought about it. Fine. So then ask yourself all the things I mentioned. Do you push people away? Can you not let people in? Do you undersell yourself? Things like that. Have you always felt like you needed to be the strong one? Whatever. Start asking yourself these questions, right? And then next, you could finally ask yourself, well, what do I need to get over these things? For example, if you feel like you never need approval, you never got approval, stop looking for approval from others and validate yourself. Get validation from yourself. Feel good about your own accomplishments. Love yourself. Very common, right? So yeah, you just really gotta be self-aware. Take a deep dive. And it's scary. I know it's scary. I get it. You don't want the truth hurts. But I promise you, doing these things, getting past these things is important because for a couple of things. First of all, they're truly holding you back. They're holding you back from everything you've ever wanted. Literally. Everything you've ever wanted could come to you if you let go of some of that stuff and fix some of these things. Self improvement is so important. Obviously, it takes time, but it really does help. And these things are holding you back from your goals, even just having a boyfriend, having a solid relationship, a not toxic relationship, maybe getting that job you want, maybe getting a promotion, whatever, right? These things are, this generational trauma is truly, that's part of what's holding you back. And once you get past it, once you do it, you'll feel so much better. Not to mention, you'll be a better person. And life's too short not to be a better person. I always say that life's too short because life truly is. Well, life's too short not to be a better person. And next, and this is where I want to be real. I think maybe people think, oh, I'm making this video so you could point the finger. Oh, it's my parents' fault I'm this way. It's my parents' fault I ended up this way. It's all their fault. It's you know what I mean? Like it's not. I'm not to blame. It's everyone else to blame, right? Pointing fingers. Nope. It's still. It's not your fault, but it's still you. It's still like, okay, it's not your fault, but you shouldn't be pointing fingers either, right? And I'll tell you why. Yes, they hurt you probably. Yes, but they truly did not mean to, right? And this is where I get sad because if you think about it, right? Sorry. But if you think about it, they were just hurting too, right? So think about, if you just think about like, oh, how much did they have to go through? How much pain did they have to feel? And how much pain are they going through at the moment to have passed down this trauma? And it's probably a lot. And they were just, your parents were just trying their best and doing what they could with what they have. And yeah, like I said, we gotta be compassionate. We have to, especially with our parents, right? And something interesting is back in the day, things weren't so woke. Most parents never went to therapy. Most parents never heard of therapy. Most parents probably were told that therapy's a lie. Shrinks are crazy, whatever. But yeah, so we can't blame them, right? We gotta show appreciation regardless of the things they passed on. And so yeah, I'm just saying, don't blame them. Just love them and forgive them if you're upset about it. Which I'm sure probably a lot of people who are mad at their parents, but you must forgive them because, well, not really because of anything. Well, yeah, like I said, just because of the things I said. They didn't mean to hurt you. They're just trying their best. So, and that's where, and yeah, I'm sorry. I was just thinking about, my parents and the things my mom went through when she lived in Thailand and the things my dad went through. I know some of this stuff when he was a kid. And I won't lie, they've passed on some stuff to me that has still messes me to me to this day, but still messes with me to this day, but I'm not mad at them for it. I forgive them. I understand. But it's our time to be better and to break the cycle, right? We don't want to pass this on to our kids. I don't know if how many people watching this want kids, but if generational trauma has held us back, we don't want to pass it on to our kids to hold them back either, right? We want the best for our kids. That's another important thing. We got to break this cycle. Breaking the cycle is the most important thing. That's how generations in your family improve. And it takes just one person, and it can be you, and it should be you, right? But, anyways, that's it for today. I hope, like I said, you guys have a great Thanksgiving. I hope you spend it with family. Hug your parents for you. Show some gratitude, regardless of what I just talked about, I know, is super deep, especially during the holidays, but I'm just something that's been on my mind lately. I see it a lot. I see a lot of YouTube videos. People are angry at their parents. Some people don't even speak to their parents anymore, and it's sad, but it's understandable in some ways, and some ways not. But yeah, hug your parents, really tell them you appreciate them. Be grateful for the life you live. Be grateful that we get to celebrate Thanksgiving. Be grateful that we got the day off, right? Hope you're spending it with loved ones. Yeah, happy Turkey Day, happy Thanksgiving. I hope you guys have a good day. Thanks for watching. Love y'all. Peace.